Behind him, Glimmerlight with her short mane blowing in the wind that tore down the thin corridor directly into our faces. I was lagging, my shoulder flaring in pain with every step, and my short gait failing to keep up with my larger friends. Above us, I heard another pop in the air as another shining star burst into a red glare that lit the streets amongst the fading light of day. More than ever, Philadelphia was a crimson hell, even outside the walls in the remainder of the city. Around us, I could hear teams of slavers moving in groups, trying to locate or head us off, along with trying to hunt down the remaining steel rangers that had gone to ground. Occasionally, a burst of intense violence broke the evening air as one was found and, more often than not, slaughtered their hunters in return. With Brimstone, I felt safe. He could take on any small group of slavers no problem, so long as his wounds didn't get too bad. In the past half hour, he'd been stabbed, shot, and bucked more times than I could count, all while defending us from the groups of slavers that infested the city on their escape prevention patrols. I'd been forced to loot through their corpses with Glimmer to try and find healing potions to keep Brimstone Blitz at his height. My mind felt ready to snap. The tension was unbearable. Intense lengths of fear and hiding punctuated with brief moments of heart-pounding terror when those klaxon calls sounded our detection. Already I could hear griffins in the air. Reinforcements from stern to watch the rooftops and wider open streets. The efficiency of Red Eye's army was downright scary in its ability to work as one, bound by his charismatic will. Was this the unity he often spoke of? I was not doing well. Already I was having to round corners only to see Brimstone turning to the next one, Glimmerlight attempting to do her best to keep sight of both of us. I knew Brimstone wouldn't leave me, but my condition was worrying me. My throat was feeling raspy again, and the more time we spent in these thin, contaminated urban areas that had been exposed to the balefire, the more my disease was starting to make itself known. Running was causing my breathing to spasm on burning coughs. It wasn't lethal yet, only bad due to exertion, but I'd need Radaway within a day or so. Come on, Murky, just keep going. We're all tired. Glimmerlight was clearly digging deeply herself, but my own body felt unable to push much further. The last time I'd actually rested that wasn't recovering from some injury or illness was long out of my memory. Many times I'd worked for days at a time, pushing or lifting heavy cargo, but out here all that obedient endurance just seemed to fade. Could I even operate properly as a free pony? Rounding the next corner, I found Brimstone halted at the end. Oh, thank you. Dropping my pace, I fell on the ground beside them, trying my best to get any air possible into my clogged lungs.
Merk,
Brimstone glanced back from the corner.
Get those lungs of yours working, and listen. Where are they?
Even nodding felt like an effort. Closing my eyes, I tried to shut out everything else and just concentrate on listening. Around us I could hear crumbling, sizzling, and hissing of broken industry, and half-faulty spark batteries. Philadelphia, even outside the wall, was nothing short of an industrial powerhouse of a city, ruined or not. In the distance, shouts and orders, some from down low. I could hear the echoes of charred walls and metal containers. Others didn't echo. They were louder sounds, probably griffins above us. We couldn't risk the main road still. The smoke deadened sound, and the concrete maze that was the industrial park in this location made it incredibly difficult to pinpoint the sounds by distance, but they're that way, and that way. I pointed with my hoof, behind us and off to the right. Glimmerlight peered around. Well, we can't go left. The gates out of the park are still locked shut. Guess we just stay the course. You sure there aren't any others? I don't know.
Come on, listen.
Brimstone was not in one of his friendlier moods. I imagined being wounded and healed so often in a short space of time would do that to a raider's attitude. I'm trying! Concentrating, I blocked out everything but sounds. I tried to tune out the ambience. The wind was irregular, but easy to ignore. A beeping from some old control room in the factories was persistent, but clearly not to do with slavers. I tuned it out. What else? A thick stomping underground not far away. A ranger in a cellar? Flutters in the air ahead of us. Oh dear. There are griffins up ahead, and I think there's a small trio of slavers about to move into this area, and A sound entered my ears that I knew all too well. It wasn't a living being. It was the sound of metal scraping and grinding along scrap-constructed gears and pivots. Philadelphia was opening its gates. Even this far out, I could hear the clunk, clunk, clunk of the massive gears sliding from tooth to tooth. Moments after, the trundle of wagons and clatter of many hooves on the ground followed. Even Glimmer seemed to pick up the far-off sounds, nodding. Guess Stern wasn't kidding about reinforcements. They'll be reaching us in 5 or 10 minutes if they stick to the main road. Remember, they know what section we're in. Why are they trying so hard to get us? We're only 3 slaves. Why can't they just let us go? My protests sounded like whines. They somewhat were, but it was born of nothing but frustration at this endless run. Glimmerlight sighed, rubbing my mane lightly. Red-Eye doesn't like losing his workers, hun. Especially not when it includes 2 of his biggest prizes, a raider warlord, and one of the few Steel Rangers, right? Her face narrowed, almost looking as though she wanted to disagree, like I'd been wrong, before stroking my mane again, and even quickly hugging me. Tightly. Yes, Brim and I, Murky. We're the ones he wants back. What had that hesitation been? No matter, we needed to get moving. Any longer and they'd... I heard a flutter. I knew that sound. Get down! I screamed, throwing myself behind the nearest large bin in the alleyway. Glimmerlight and Brimstone Blitz dived to the side, as rapid fire, streaks of magical energy tore up the length of the alley from above. Dirt was fused to a goopy green that pulsated and stunk of fried air in little chunks, as was portions of my cover.
Move!
Brimstone roared, grabbing and swinging me onto his back before galloping off. Gripping his mane as tightly as I could, I found that the wagon had been nothing in comparison to the rough ride here. We took off, galloping out of the alleyway and into a storage yard, long stripped bare by Red-Eye's slaves, leaving things too heavy to carry. Empty pallet trucks and deserted train carriages made it a metallic maze surrounding the central cargo rail building. Above it, I could see a cartoonesque pony riding a tiny train filled with smiling workers. If only. More griffins dove from the clouds, their scout having spotted us by sheer luck. Brimstone turned down between 2 lengths of train to avoid most of the incoming fire, sticking to the right as rounds pinged and ricocheted between the carriages. I felt my mane whip, whether from the wind or a passing bullet I didn't know. Glimmerlight followed us, breathing heavily but determination lending her the strength to keep pushing. At the end of the 2 trains lay a third, mounted on the same rail we were galloping down, its back carriage open to the passenger compartment. Hearing the platform creak under the weight, I held on as Brimstone launched himself into it. With windows exploding and melting on either side of the cascade of bright colors, Brimstone hurtled down between 2 lines of seats. The train had to have been partially armored against zebra ambushes, for few holes were made but for the small windows, and their weapons didn't penetrate the main chassis. I heard the thunk of taloned feet landing above us, on the roof. Brimstone stopped short, knowing that to burst out between the carriages would be little more than running right into their line of fire. I could see him thinking, glancing to and fro. Stern's griffins weren't going to give us that time to think. With the sharp sound of impacts on glass, I saw metal apples held down and tossed through the broken windows. Rolling to a halt before us, thin bands pinged off them. Grenades! Glimmerlight was the first to act. Almost screaming, she pushed the boundaries of her stamina into her magic, and hurled the lethal orbs as far down the carriage as she could. Unable to lift them, they just skittered along the floor while we ducked behind the seats. Shielded by Brimstone, I covered my ears. There was little point. The noise so intense that I felt my ears pop and replace all sound with a keening whine. I didn't even hear the sound they made, just a dull whoomp. The shockwave made my stomach turn and my head ache. Again and again, grenade after grenade, painful shots in my ears and spikes of pain through the middle of my skull. The entire train lurched and shook again and again as each explosive set itself off or detonated others early. Dizzied, I opened my eyes to find Glimmerlight almost collapsed on the floor. Worry overrode my own pains, and I pulled myself over to her, trying to help her stand. Her hoof was tapping me, her mouth moving with no sound emerging. Holding my face up, she nodded through hazed eyes. Sound gradually returned. okay. Just tired. I think I've burned out. Too much in the stable and now all this. The sounds of falling train parts and popping flames surrounded us. My thoughts turned to the griffins. They had to have retreated to let their detonation go off. But did they think us dead? Brimstone made the decision for us, bellowing for us to move before they decided to come and check amidst the smoke that now shielded us. Yet, as we lagged, he shook his head.
You two won't last in a run with flyers. Move through the smoke, get inside the station, and lay low.
Glimmer shook her head, staggering to her hooves. We need to keep moving and—
No arguments, Glim. Get in the fucking station.
Both Glimmer and I stood in virtual shock. Brimstone had been firm, but he had never spoken to her in that tone. Ever. I felt Glimmer pulling me with a hoof. Staring into Brimstone's eyes, I saw the authority that had destroyed entire settlements for that second, reflected in the fire and smoke of battle. Even as Glimmerlight tugged me down the train, that glare bored into my eyes. Not for the first time, but certainly more than ever. I was beginning to see the beast inside that began emerging in the middle of such chaos and violence. In some manner, I felt like I was running away from him.